call Carol Beaumont.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair. The Education Amendment Bill, let me pick up from where Tracy Martin was on this bill, because the title of this bill is an innocuous one, isn't it? Education Amendment Bill, it could be anything, but actually it does not reflect what the magnitude of change that's being proposed in this legislation. And the changes are probably some of the biggest changes for decades. And in particular, the changes around the charter schools is the one that I wish to focus on. And I want to look at it in the context of both the title but also look at what's being changed and reflect that in the title. So the charter school provisions are providing for a number of things that Labor is strongly opposed for. It gives schools the right to have unqualified and unregistered teachers, and that includes the principal of the charter school. It also means that the school will not have to follow the New Zealand curriculum. So I've been reflecting on this title, the Education Amendment Bill, and thinking, if we're serious about this, if the government is so proud of this initiative, let's call it something that does reflect what this bill is actually about. It could be charter schools, parents don't deserve to have a voice, because actually what this provides for is getting away with our democratic provisions in our school system, our elected boards of trustees that provide parents and the community with a say on what happens in their local school. That's all done away with. And instead, the sponsor of the school can determine what happens in that school. And that includes, as I say, staff that are not necessarily qualified as teachers or indeed registered to teach. Now, maybe it could be the charter schools profit before pupils bill, because actually what this does is allow schools to operate at a profit. And we had quite a lot of discussion last night about why it is that this legislation excludes coverage from the Official Information Act and the Ombudsman Act. Now, we had a lot of debate about, in fact, what was excluded and what in terms of the Official Information Act, and it was pointed out by the Minister that those things that are in the contract of the charter school would be able to be accessed from the Ministry by people using the Official Information Act if they needed to. But a lot of debate last night about what information would and wouldn't be included in that reporting against contract, and the information held by the school will not be covered by the Official Information Act. So I wonder if perhaps an alternative title could be Charter Schools, Lack of Transparency and Accountability, because I think that the fact that information about what is going on in these schools, at least in part, will not be covered by the Official Information Act, and certainly the Ombudsman is not able to be used in relation to charter schools, and something I wasn't there for the submissions, Mr Chair, but I understand the Ombudsman was absolutely critical, absolutely determinedly critical, in fact, of what the government was proposing here, and the lack of transparency, the lack of accountability in this legislation. So I think charter schools' lack of transparency and accountability may well be a good name for this bill. But I want to go back to where I started from, because I think, as somebody who values education very highly, as I know my colleagues on this side of the House do, and the fact that we recognise the importance of teachers and those that lead teachers, principals, and their very critical role to delivery of quality education, I think I am going to go with the title Charter School Students Don't Deserve Qualified and Registered Teachers, because that's what is enabled by this legislation. Now, you know, teacher quality is something that those across the other side of the House say that they believe in. At a time the government claim they're focusing, in fact, on increasing the quality of teaching, and in Budget 2012 they indicated that they intended to introduce a postgraduate qualification as a requirement for trainee teachers. This bill allows... Mr Chair, thank you very much, Mr Chair. This bill allows charter schools to employ staff with no formal teaching qualifications at all. That's like saying that, in the end, anybody could teach. There's no specific requirements of teachers. There's no specific knowledge base. There's no particular competencies or skill requirements of teachers that in the end, perhaps if you're funny enough or engaging enough, you could teach. That's what it's really saying, that this isn't a real profession. Well, actually, we all know, if we're honest, that that's not true. We all know that that's not true. And even the principal of a charter school doesn't need to be a qualified teacher. Now, you have to ask yourself, the role, and all of us, I'm sure, visit schools, the role that is played by a principal as a leader of education and learning in a school is absolutely critical. A good principal. They have to understand what teachers do. They have to understand the learning environment. Somebody who is not a qualified or registered teacher as a principal just does not make sense. And so I have to say that just seems to me to reinforce the need to change the title of this bill to make it really clear to New Zealanders who hear about this legislation going through that it isn't the innocuous Education Amendment Bill. This is the Charter School Students Don't Deserve Qualified and Registered Teachers Bill. Now, there are a unique set of skills that teachers require. And apparently the Prime Minister, on the other hand, said people shouldn't be hung up, that's a quote, hung up on the fact that teachers without qualifications will be able to teach New Zealand children in charter schools. So let's not be hung up about that, says the Prime Minister. But actually, not that long ago, that same Prime Minister was telling parents it's not the class sizes that matter, it's the quality of the teaching that we're getting in our schools. So how are we going to get this quality teaching if we're able to have unqualified and unregistered teachers across that school? It's astounding, really, that the Prime Minister thinks that those two statements go together. Now, part of National's promise to improve teacher quality, again, doesn't make sense because they said they wanted to improve teacher quality at the same time that they cut funding for teacher professional development by $15 million per year. This speech is about what this bill really is about, not the title, the Education Amendment Bill, but my suggestion that if we're being honest, this should be the Charter School Students Don't Deserve Qualified and Registered Teachers Bill. Now, I know the government like to say that teacher opposition to this bill is all because they're unionists and they're trying to protect their wages and conditions. I've been appalled during the last term and the current term of this government at the way they think it's appropriate to attack teachers constantly, to undermine teachers, when we all know that the community actually values and respects teachers and that their job is critically important to the future social and economic development of this country. So let me say that it wasn't just teachers and teacher unions and principal organisations that raised concerns about this bill and the lack of requirement for qualified and registered teachers. Not at all. The National Council of Women, New Zealand's largest women's organisation, which is made up of branches from all around New Zealand, the National Council of Women, made up from branches from all around New Zealand, of women from an absolutely diverse range of professions and organisations. National Council of Women, in their submission to the Select Committee, were absolutely adamant that this was the wrong way to go, having unqualified and unregistered teachers in our schools. So it's not just about teachers. They did say that. Mr Bridges, have a look at the submission. So I just want to say that this concern and this disquiet about what is being proposed in this legislation is widely shared in the community by teachers and principals, yes indeed, but also by the wider community and the parents in our community. The parents who know that what a difference teachers can make. And if we are honest, if we are all honest, we will know.
Dr. King called up.
Mr. Chair, I move that the question be now put.
I'm going to hear from Catherine Delahunty.
Mr. Chair, I really appreciate this opportunity, having spent the last